Hey everybody, we're here with my friend Allan Iverson, who it's an honor to have him back on. I've had him on many summits now, so it's great looking back at all the informative content that Allan's made with us here. And in case you haven't seen Allan, he is a tennis lover first and foremost, and he's been running pro shops and teaching for 25 years now. He's also had been a Babble at Rep for 16 years. That's the brand I play with. You probably can see the bag and rackets there. So I really enjoy playing with the Pure Air 98 now. But Allan, just thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's always exciting and fun for me to talk about product. I'm fortunate to BMP and be at the Tennis Warehouse booth and help sell product. It's always fun meeting and talking to people about product and help them to enjoy the sport we all love.
Yeah, most definitely. And we're here today to talk about the current trends in rackets, strings, and shoes. We'll probably get into that as well, and also just how we can use these different sorts of. Some folks, I guess, don't. Oh, sorry. I think we blanked out. But I feel that many folks don't realize oftentimes the true impact of how much gear can help our game. So I was wondering if you could educate the audience about that and why it's so important to choose the right gear.
Well, I mean, you think there would be uniformity with it. It's an interesting process because, rackets are handmade. There's a lot that goes into layup. Same thing, like 1,000 hands test a pair of shoes. Strings a little bit different, but there's still people who have to monitor that process. And now, string has changed the way rackets can play and what they can do. And, over time, the market figures out different ways of creating a better experience for the consumer, right? So, and even some of the trends we'll talk about at the pro level will be different than for people who aren't pro, right? Because pro levels change just because the level and the ability of the athletes we see is pretty amazing, right? And what they can do.
Yeah,
so, racket trends, at the pro level are going smaller head size, thinner beam. So Pure Aero 98, which Boblot has Carlos Alcaraz in, but also Arthur Fees, Runa, they were all in the semis of that last tournament. We have other high-level players testing that racket. And that's a great racket for a smaller head, thinner beam for control and maneuverability, but we still sell more of the 100 square inch and thicker beam Pure Aero. That's more universal for, someone who's not 21 at the top of the world. String choice, the materials, polyester strings, super popular for their spin, control, and durability, but it's not a very elastic material. And it's really made for someone who can break strings in a couple of weeks, really less. But, pro use, they'll use it because of the spin and control it can give them. V.S. Scott, which Boblot really started with, it's the 150th year of Boblot's creation, because a year into the creation of tennis, the founder of the tennis came and asked for strings be made, and they were making gut for surgery and for violins, and they started using it in rackets. And that really is a top choice for if you want feel, control, power. Boblot has a lot of other brands who come to us for string for their players because it gives them that added benefit at the highest level.
Yeah,
it was interesting. We were talking before we got on. I just got back from an international sales meeting because of a celebration around this, and we went to the Gut Factory, which is, kind of, like southwest in France. It's a place called Plurmel. It's where the cows are, and it takes basically a month to make a set of gut. It's very hands-on.
Eesh.
The clothes you wear, you throw them away because it's cow intestine, but it's a very labor-intensive process. And Boblot has a unique history. It's just like a good cook. You learn how to create this material over time, and you get people who can do the work. And it was interesting seeing the pride that goes into creating this product. in what all these producers do, not just Boblet, but all across the world, all the tennis producers trying to create the best product for their players.
Yeah, 100%. Really, really enjoy using them. So it's always interesting, Alan, to examine the trends happening. Whether it's be racket, strings, shoes, etc. So let's go with rackets right now. What are some of the main trends there?
So the trends you're seeing at the pro level are smaller heads. So a smaller head, like a 98, mid-size, mid-plus is around 100 square inch. 98 is smaller, but typically, this is a 98 square inch beam versus 100. So it's a thinner tapered beam versus 100. So this is a little bigger head, this little smaller head. Excuse the tape, it's a demo. And there's a little denser pattern for the 98. It's 1620 versus 16 by 19. So when we talk about rackets, head size is one thing. So head size will give you more stability, more power, less maneuverability because friction in the air. Thicker beam, and it depends how it's laid up and how it's done, but thicker beam means more power, but less flex, less feel. So this beam you can see is thinner. This is thicker. This is a little denser pattern, which will give you a little more control in the string bed, but it also softens the frame. So 16 by 20, 98 patterns, very popular on the Pro Tour. A more open pattern like this will give me more power, more spin, thicker beam, again, more power, but less maneuverability and control. So in terms of what sells, we still sell a lot more Pure Arrows, though. Pure Arrow 98 is selling better for the higher level user right now. If I'm using a one-handed backhand, I might prefer a little smaller head because it's a little easier to maneuver, right? Mm-hmm. So then we add weight to that. The weight for the 98 is a little heavier at 10.8 versus 10.6, but the way they swing will be about the same because the 10.6 100 square inch racket is a little more to move through the air. So weight, string pattern, thickness of beam, all those make a difference along with head size. It used to be 100 square inches, like 110 square inches were very popular. We have like this, a 107 racket in the Pure Drive line. We used to make a 110 in this line, but a lot of those sales have gone away. People are buying 104s, a little bit bigger, but not as big. It used to be more the bigger heads would sell well because that's even more power. And then we get into the next and last kind of parameter which is length. This is a bigger head, again, more power, little longer length. Typically, these are lighter weight because they're more to maneuver because of head size and length. So the longer the racket, the more power. It's a longer lever. So back in the day, when you had Andy Roddick playing, he was playing with the Pure Drive in an extended length, half inch longer, because a lot of your bigger servers like that. Songa, Query, bigger servers like an extended length. A lot of that's gone. A little smaller head, still sometimes extended length because it gives them the more power on the serve.
Gotcha, Alan. Yeah, it's very interesting. I've got my Pure 98 here, which I enjoy playing with. Switch to that one. I before that I used the VS. But actually, I've had this line of rackets for ever since you actually suggested it to me, Alan, in 2017 or 18. So really, I just really enjoy that 1620 pattern. And I was wondering, in terms of like the bigger head size that you were just discussing, would you say that 4.0 and 4.5 players, should they, because I feel like there's a mentality where it's like, oh, I'm a 4.5, I don't look at rackets 100 square inches above 100 square inches. So but I mean, I think Serena at one point, wasn't she playing with a 104? I mean,
she was 104 extended length.
Yeah
she was 104 extended length, and it just, she liked it. It was a little thinner beam, so her beam, she was in the blade line, but this is to see how this beam is even thinner. And the construction here is a little different, right? Because it's not fully elliptical, right? It's partly squared. So back in the day, they're going to reintroduce some Roger Federer Pro Staff line rackets, which is a square beam. So anything square beam gives you great flex, but not a lot of response, not a lot of power, right? So when you start to round a beam like this, you get a little more power. When it's square here, you get more flex and feel, less power. So she was in that 104, but more of a hybrid frame like this in extended length. So bigger head, longer length, helped her on her already big serve.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. We've got some questions here, so great to see. And I think this one, I imagine it's gear related, but any tips for an elite junior 12 and under? What types of rackets are you suggesting for them?
Well, you're finding the blend you want, right? I mean, it used to be, the better you get, the heavier and heavier you go, but rackets have really gotten lighter. One of the amazing things is how fast the game is now. Polyester strings, which give you great spin, durability, control. They got a great snapback, which you can't really see. It happens quickly. But in a high burn rate, so they last long, they create spin. It's allowed these players to swing super fast and still control the ball and give it spin, right? So you got to find your right weight. It doesn't necessarily need to go up weight, but find the right weight. I mean, even in Bomblett's line, we make a light version. Again, I'll tell you ounces, but 9.5, team version 10.1, and then 10.6. Well, we're actually going to bring a super light back in the line in the US, which is even 9 ounces. So forgive me, my grams aren't so good, but you're finding your right weight. And this is the whole trial and error, because you're trying to find the right blend, right marriage of rackets and strings. One of the trends that kind of Rude started from Norway is even blending polys, like doing a rounded with a shaped one. Some people think that makes a difference. You knew he was doing it because polys come in a lot of different colors. He have 2 different colors of strings in his rackets. And I asked like the guys who string at the pro level, why the pro's doing that. Well, they're just trying to fine tune, but it could be true. It could be not true. I mean, stringing information is a little bit like nutritional information. Some of it's true. Some of it's just kind of hype. So the manufacturers who are doing these 2 types of poly constructions sell pretty well initially, just because it's what's on trend now. I mean, it's the polyester slip that gives you the spin. It's not really how coarse or not coarse the string is, but there's a lot of hype around that. So you're finding the right weight of racket you like with the right string setup, right? With polys, typically the pros are stringing looser because it's not an elastic material. You don't need to string as tight. So 40 pounds, 42 pounds, you can go up a little higher. When you're going into softer materials, they call multi-filaments or natural gut. That will give you more power, right? And more feel, better tension maintenance. People will start to hybrid those strings, right? Well, you'll get a main string in poly and a cross string, in a multi. That will give you the best spin story. If you flip it and you put a multi-filament here and a poly here, you'll still get better durability, but a little more feel and power, but less spin and control. So pros hybrid, usually with natural gut, and they do it both ways. Or they typically go poly loose. Some pros will go tighter, but the trend on the tour is really smaller head and not as heavy. Back in the day, you had some pro spec rackets, Federer, even Nadal's racket. They're super heavy, but those pros were taking bigger swings from further back. And even you look at a guy like Ben Shelton, who's a rising American, which we love to see. Like his forehand swing length a lot shorter now. If you look at what Alcaraz has done to his backhand, it used to be up higher here. Now you'll see he takes it down lower and his arm straighter. Well, why? Just because it's so much faster. So for you as an elite junior, find the right power level you want in a racket. For us, our pure drive's the most responsive, then pure arrow, and then the thinner beam, pure strike, even more feel and control. And then find the right string setup. And string setup is really, it's trial and error. You gotta understand the advantage drawback to each one, because it's not like one size fits all. I mean, RPM Blast sells well for us, but Alcaraz using RPM Blast, he needed a little bit softer one because his arm was getting sore because why? He's hitting 100 mile an hour forehands. went to RPM Team, which is a softer version of it. So then rough for us is even softer. We make an RPM Power and soft that even goes softer. But you're still softening up a stiff material. But he had to fine tune his strings over time. Some players like Nadal, they find that they get the tension they want, they get the gauge they want, and they just go. Like Nadal was 15 gauge, which is the thickest gauge. You think the other way would be the thinner one, but the 15 is actually how many strings can fit through like a plumber's measurement. So when you go like 16, 17, 18, even 19, they're actually thinner, which will give you a little more string movement, but less durability, less control. So Nadal was 15 gauge till the end of his career, and then he went 16 to get a little more power.
That's really good.
So you're finding that right blend, and if you're going poly and you like it, great. Just after, 3-4 weeks, if it's not breaking, and you feel like you're losing control, I would cut that string out and go with a new string.
Allan, I have a question, selfishly applicable to me, but many others too, which is, I wonder, so with me, I find that the last couple of days of hitting with the racket feel the best, because I guess the strings I'm really comfortable with at that point, at least half the time, I would say. So I guess, you think the solution for that is just string lower tensions?
Yeah, you're probably finding the better resting tension you want. I mean, part of the challenge is, when you're getting your racket strung, what you've got to consider is, you want to find a good local dealer who can get to know you and who you are, and kind of, continue to walk you through this process. Now, there's two types of string machines. One is a crank machine, which is popular in the US. The Europeans don't even know about crank machines. Bob Lott actually was the first one who would start to promote this kind of electric machine. So, but they're very common in Europe, and they string tighter because when you take the clamp off to do the string again, it keeps pulling, and then you clamp, it strings about 10% tighter. So keep that in mind. If you're out of town, you go to a different stringer. If you're used to a crank, well, you're used to it 10% looser. So when you see pros tensions, you got to understand that's with a electric machine, and you'll see it. I mean, again, some pros are across the board. Some go higher. The problem with the poly, if you're too tight, it's just hard on your arm. What you're finding is, you like it looser, go looser. And most people stay with their strings too long. That's the engine to your car. I mean, Bob used to say 90%, now it's down to 70, but bottom line is a lot of your performance is in your string. Keep your strings right, put new grips on your racket. Now white grips are very popular because, Yonex made a really tacky white grip, and then the black grip was really absorbent. Well, so now white over grips are what's sold because Yonex started the trend. White grips actually makes no sense because how quick is this going to get dirty? Like whatever, because the oil and dirt from your hand. But there you go. But the nice thing is too, the benefit is, it's kind of getting dirty. You're trying to feel if you have traction. This is your tires. So make sure you maintain the grip and you maintain your string bed. And you're really trying to, in your phone or in a diary, start to say, hey, I really like this. I really didn't. Some pros, Nadal never changed his string or tension, whereas Nadal would change to condition, to surface. I mean, where Federer would change to condition and surface. He'd go, oh God, at Wimbledon, if it was warmer, he'd go a little tighter. If it was colder, he'd go a little looser. Because, the air, if it's thicker, like wintertime, if it's cold where you're at, and if it's damp, it's slower conditions, right? Where depending where you play, our home office in Colorado is 3,000 feet. Well, you look like a hero serving because the air is less dense and it goes faster. So some people adjust to that, some people don't, right? So, but be aware of them because it does affect how you play. So the people who play a lot at altitude, no problem. But for us going to different places like that, it really does make a difference.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely, Alan. You cut off for a tiny bit, but I think we got pretty much all of that. It was like 1 second. Um, so let's see. We got some more questions. Puffin, please can you advise for a 10-year-old boy who breaks multi-filament strings regularly? I'm not sure about polyester strings, not arm friendly, as you mentioned, Alan. He currently uses hybrid with a poly main and multi-filament cross.
So, I mean, what's happened in response to this, right? I mean, Allan is a unique family-owned fifth generation company because they really try to innovate and be product innovators and leaders in the market, right? It's a French-owned company. They're innovative, do a lot of their own testing. Like part of this celebration, we went and literally looked at rackets that they lay up for Alcaraz or Arthur Fees, all these top pros, not just in tennis but in paddle and all that. So what Bobla did is they came out with this one string called Exalt. Sorry, this reminds me of my videoing I was doing when I was in France for as a tourist. Was not good. My wife was laughing, but it's okay. We'll try to get it right for the camera. Okay, it's easier for you. You do more camera stuff. So this is an interesting string because it's meant to play like a hybrid. So it's a multi-filament, but it has a glass bead inlay, which gives it better slip. And so it gives it a little more control, but it has the softness of a multi. And that's part of that transition. You can go from a multi-filament. You could go to something like this, which will give you a little bit more spin and control. It's not going to play as powerful as a multi, but it'll be easier on your arm and give you some of that control you're seeking as you swing faster. So that's what we've done. We changed also addiction to make it more durable, a little crisper, because it's all in relationship to people wanting you to play polys. A lot of your young teaching pros and pros coming to the market, their college teams, here's your free string. It's all polyester because the college, these kids hit so amazing and so hard with spin, they give them polyester because it's a value story, right? It lasts longer. But so they suggest a lot of that for their clients. It might not be adapted for them. That's why we're having this conversation. Figure out what you like. I'm not even telling you right or wrong. I'm just telling you advantage, drawback, right? RPM's the best selling string. Definitely not for everybody, right? Even I'm telling you, RPM was even perfect for Alcaraz. He need to go a little softer because of how hard he hits, right? And again, these guys, 100-mile-an-hour forehands, crazy. Back in the days, guys could hit that hard, not 10 times in a row. It really is. I just can't believe the level that we're seeing. So, and you get other polys, like we make a rough color. The weird thing about polys here is when you color a poly, it plays different, plays softer. Not as much true with multi-filament. Sometimes we make a black Excel. The coating on that makes it play a little differently. But, polys, typically you'll see different colors and they will play differently. So in rough, we make a red, that's stiffer. We make a dark gray, that's somewhere in between. This is the softest color, right? So even among poly, you'll see different playability. So keep that in mind. And again, we're talking about softening up a stiff material and consider gauge, right? So thinner gauge, 17, will go be easier on your arm, but less durable, less control.
Thanks, Alan. Great guidelines there. Questions are streaming in here. So, Kelsey Land, is gut a viable choice for a club player who loves that feel versus a poly string? I play with a Babolat Pure Drive.
98. Pure Drive 98. Yeah,
98,
Jerry's
sorry,
in that racket. Great racket.
Yeah.
Similar construction to the Pure LVS, but more powerful. Probably the most changed racket in the Babolat line. And it really was in response to people loving the response of the Pure Drive, but wanting a little bit more maneuverability and control, and that's what it is. VS Gut, to me, if you can afford it, it's the best long-term story. So after 20 hours of use, multi-films will lose about 15 to 25% of their tension. Any poly, 50%. You're not going to notice as much with a poly because it's a poly. It's not as reactive. It's not as powerful, but it gives you more spin and control. Gut's only 5 to 10%. Feel, how the string, elongates the string bed. So bigger sweet spot, more power, more feel. There's nothing like that, and it's really a labor intensive process with a lot of quality checks to make sure it's right. So if you can afford it, great. And they've done a lot of things, to give it a coating to make it more resistant to weather. You don't want to be playing when it's wet out, with wet tennis balls, because that will get into the string. But other than that, you're good. The construction of the string got a little bit more, the strands got a little bit thicker that they did to make it last a little longer. But there's nothing like that. If you can afford it, it's the best way to go. And this is the engine to your car. So this is why Porsche charges so much for upgrades, right? Because they know the engine makes the difference. And there's nothing like the feel good.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's why it's a bit,
and other manufacturers have tried to make it, but if you get the wrong coating, like I would talk to the people who made them, like, why don't you just put polyester in it or anything like that? And I said, well, the problem is if you put a stiffer material, the string will only stretch to the length of the stiff material. So getting the coating right, the drying process, all that, because understand it's an organic material. If you don't dry it, you don't twist it right, you don't coat it right, it's going to break. So that's what Boblet's done a lot of work on. Like, even if we have breakage, they'll go back to what the batch was and see if there's any issues, because it's all about maintaining the integrity and promise of the brand.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Let's see, more questions here. Oh, Christopher, a good one. And also, with this question of how often you suggest a string change, I mean, it's, a lot of times, I know players who they just, even though their strings perform not well, the tension's lost and they're missing, they just have some sort of, mentality of like, I don't want to waste, the string. But so what's the answer here, Allan?
It depends partly on how much you play, the conditions you're playing in, and what kind of material you're using. Poly, you got to be willing after a while just to burn it. After 25, 30 hours of use, burn it. It's gone dead. It's not even really giving you the feedback you want. That's why for you, it's better if you start just a little looser, because you'll like it better. We're all afraid to do it, right? Because back before polyester, we strung tighter to get control. Now the material, being that it's less elastic and slips for spin, can give you that control. So keep that in mind, right? With your string, if it's that. If you're using a multi-filament, you can go longer, right? You can go 30, 40 hours. Natural gut, 50, 60 hours, maybe longer. But you're taking a diary too. It doesn't have to be every time you play, but just what are you feeling about how the response is? Part of this is you training you to know what you like, right? And I want to give you the parameters to do that, but you could just do it in your phone. I felt great. The spin felt great, all that. And like I told you, condition make a difference too. As we get into summer, it's trying to restring, because if it gets hot, everything gets faster, right? Air, the ball itself is lighter because the gases in it are less dense, right? The air itself is lighter. If you're playing at altitude, you got to string up, use a different ball. So those are my suggestions. Be aware of that if you really want to make the most adapted process, right? And that's what you want. At the end of the day, you want to be so comfortable you don't have to think about it. Once you're thinking about your product, it doesn't feel natural, like a part of you. That's where it's a problem. And that's why the players are so manic. They don't want to think about it. They just want to hit.
Yeah, definitely. Allan, more questions here from my buddy Arash. We play tennis together sometimes. Hey, Merbon, I typically get 4 matches / 7 to 9 hours on my Babolat RPM 18 before I feel my technique having to adjust for the drop in tension. Is there any poly string that is best in all areas so I won't have to keep cutting the strings out and restringing, or is it just a balance thing?
I mean, you could go a little thicker gauge and you're going to get more control and a little more durability. But basically, if you're breaking in 7 to 9 hours, you're the perfect poly user, right? You can go up
Mhm.
engage and get more control, but less, response. And again, what does that mean? There's a ton of people using poly who shouldn't be using it. It's too early. It's too hard on their arm. They should hybrid. It's just what's being recommended by their pro. And if your pro says use it, you're going to use it because they're the perceived expert, and it might be the right choice for them, but not necessarily for you. Now, if you really, these mid-power rackets have gotten a lot more control because the poly gives it to them. You're finding your right balance here, but you can see, even like you're saying, 7-9 hours, I'm done. Pros are changing with the ball change. So they change every 45 minutes, basically, right? Usually every 9 games, 7 in the first game because part of it's warm up. So, it's just like new tires for your car. I mean, you want the best performance. Pay attention to that. You could go open gauge, but you might enjoy that control. You might say, I like it a little softer. I want a little thinner gauge. We don't really make a 19 gauge. Other manufacturers make 19. You might be splitting hairs there. We don't do it just because 18 is probably thin enough for a poly.
And then, sorry.
You could play around with softer polys, RPM team, RPM rough.
Yeah.
But now you're going softer, more powerful. Do you like that? Do you not? It just depends what you want.
Yeah, that was my follow-up, Allan. I was going to ask, are there any other strings that you recommend that he try?
We go really from RPM team, which are a little different construction, materials. RPM rough, same thing, a little different materials, and we color it. So they're going softer. We even go into RPM soft here. This is RPM blast, which is the top selling string, right? This is another look at RPM rough in a different color. We do RPM 17 and black 17 or 16 gauge gut in a hybrid set that we sell, because some people hybrid. But if he's breaking that quick, he could play around with gauge or go a little softer if he wanted a little more response. But he might not like that. Understand, if you really get a string that gives you better control, you might hit harder, not because the string's more powerful, but you feel like you got more control, feel like you can hit out. And you're adapting this process.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's take another one. What racket do you suggest for a senior 50-year-old? Tough one.
It depends on swing speed, right? So, when you had a lot of people blocking and slicing and swinging hard, an oversized extended length racket, most good oversized 110 square inches, longer rackets are great because they give you power and margin without you having to swing much. If you swing faster, you got to start going down in head size. And then, like we talked about, you're finding the right swinging right. Maybe you're doing a hybrid. You could do a poly loose, again, depending how fast you swing, right? So you're trying to find that right balance. As you go up in head size and length, you get power. As you change your string material, you get different amounts of power with multi-filament control with poly. It just depends what you like. And this is the trial and error process of it. This is why the demo process is so key, and you understand the variables so you adapt it to you. And understand, not all racket manufacturers make rackets that feel the same. You know what I'm saying? Everyone has a different feel, right? So, head, you're going to get a little bit more of an elongated shape where the sweet spot's higher. Yonex does a dampening system in the handle, which makes a racket more comfortable, but you get a little bit more muted feel for the ball. That's not bad or good. Bob likes a little more feel for the road, so to speak. But it's not wrong or right. It's just what you like. Wilson's somewhere in between. Wilson came out with the Clash, which kind of changed a little bit in some of its variables. But the Clash was unique because it was such a soft, comfortable racket. And that's not necessarily about performance. That's more about comfort, right? So that Clash really brought about, wait a second, we're making these very powerful rackets. So all the manufacturers had to reconsider, we need to make a racket not only perform well, but have a comfort and have vibration damage, because with poly being used more in the market, you know, and some people maybe not who should use it, who shouldn't use it, who are. We got to make these rackets more comfortable. Even like sports cars nowadays, they all have a comfort mode. You have a performance mode, but you don't really feel like feeling the road, because if you're driving 2 hours and you're feeling the road, you're going to be feeling the road, you know, into the night. So finding, you know, that comfort balance. So rackets, they've made them more comfortable. Now, what Boblet does a little bit different, and this is the next trend we haven't talked about, is there's some really unique strings. Luxilon is unique in the market because their strings make a different sound. So RPM Blast is known for spin. It's no control. It's a soft feel, but it has a different sound than Luxilon. So it changed a little bit our thinking, Boblet's developers thinking. Players, you know this, but you don't notice. You know the sound. Like when you go on a court and it's a sunken court and you've got walls around you, how fun is that? Because you really hear the ball. What a cool sound that is. I still remember years I was at BMP, I was going to watch, and you walk through this tunnel from the parking, and I'm hearing this sound. It sounds like gunshots. It's Lindsay Davenport hitting tennis balls. It sounded like they're coming out of a rifle. I mean, when you hear the pros hit a ball, it's crazy good. So what does that mean? For our Pure Aero 98, same thing with Pure Drive or Pure Aero and Pure Drive, those rackets have a little less vibration dampening because that player at that level wants to hear it, right? Whereas the Team in the Light are more open. They've got more power, more spin, even more vibration dampening, because that user's more about spin, comfort, and power. And this is the way we've adapted to us. And that's what you're trying to figure out. How much am I looking for? More comfort and power? Am I looking for a little bit more control and feedback? And that's the variable. I mean, that's the Clash is a great racket, revolutionary for our market and helpful for tennis in general, because it helped us understand this new trend that people were looking for, right? So that's what you're trying to figure out, is you're dialing in how you like it.
Speaking of trying to dial in how you like it, how about for doubles players? Is there any sort of, I don't know, like specific specs or like racket line or anything like that that you would actually think is better for, you know, doubles players, considering I guess they probably just especially want to focus on, you know, of course volleys, but then like serve return, big, you know, big in those categories?
Typically the mid-size head could potentially be better, right? I mean, if you're a one-hander, you still might want to go down, right? You know, if you're a bigger server and you wanted more power, you could go to extended length, right? A lot of the doubles players who do well are typically in 100 square inches, you know, who like a little bigger head size. Pure Aero has been out there a lot. You know, it just depends the response you're looking for. I mean, what you're considering when you get a racket is, you know, the bigger head size is better for volleys, but you're trying to figure out the best racket you can get for you, not only creating power, but controlling. Part of doubles is not just creating power, but really in doubles, it's more about how accurate you are and can you hit the openings when you have the opening. Not even necessarily powerfully, like medium speed. That could be a great lob, could be a great volley to the right spot. What's changed in doubles now is it used to be everyone comes to net. Well, now it's one up, one back. Sometimes it's two back. Sometimes it's two back on the serve. Crazy, but it's happening. So you have to learn how to hit short. Like I'm watching a pro video. The guys, and when I was at BMP this year, I didn't get to see as many matches. It used to be like with your vendor pass, you could like go see the matches. So I was more in the practice course, but I watched every men, women, singles, doubles players, volley deep, volley short, volley deep, volley short. They were practicing hitting both ones with underspin. So you're finding the best combination that helps you not only push them deep, but dump them short with underspin so it stays down. They were all working those trends. So it's about power, but it's also about control. How can I absorb the power? So a more powerful racket gives me more power. And part of your demo process is try to get it with the string material you normally use. This isn't perfect. You can't always. When I go to demos, I have both materials. I have a multi-film, I have a poly, right? Nice. So we can adapt it and talk that story. That's part of what Tennis Warehouse was asking when I give my demos to them at BMP when they're out in the back courts there. Usually I think it's court 25. They do a great job. You know, there you are. So get the demo process, get the right string, and play with people you normally play with. Because you might hit with this racket, oh yeah, I'm hitting better. And the people you normally play with who know your game go, no, there's no difference.
Yeah.
Or yeah, I thought you hit your ball feels different coming off this racket. You know, and understand it's crazy that all this being said, manufacturers spend a ton of time figuring out what color you like. You know, Boblet's done a good job staying in their story, but it's just like a fancy sports car. You've got to get the color right.
You do.
You got to get it right. Now, Boblet kind of tries to stay in their lanes, you know, blues, pure drive, arrows, kind of yellow. You'll see a very interesting new arrow coming out for 2026. Colors a little bit, I don't want to overhype it, shocking. And then pure strike, you'll see a color change in the pure strike. Like it was white. We'll make a little bit of a color change here. And it's always crazy. Like this, you know, normally it's been white. It's currently white. In August, it will be this color.
Wow.
And we had Carlos Moya was a huge influencer for Bobelot. You know, got to #1, used the pure drive, which was a powerful racket, which originally they thought only, you know, would be more adapted for slower swingers. Could be women, could be juniors. And he was a 6'1" guy when 6'1" was tall back in those days. And winning French Open, getting to #1 with that racket, his spec never changed. We changed the paint job with the rackets.
Sure.
Every time we changed it, you know, they changed it, not we, I didn't do anything. He said it played different just because of the paint job. So it's a little tricky. Now, some spec changes are different. Like, you know, Boblet came out with this racket. So again, apologize for the tape. It's a demo. This is actually Rafa spec. Almost no one should use this. This was like, again, please forgive me, my grams are terrible. This 11.2, and we used to make a pure arrow tour, which is a heavyweight at this weight, but it was 11 points headlight. Because typically when Boblet makes the racket heavier, they lighten, put more weight in the handle, so you get the benefit of the mass, but it's still maneuverable. Well, this is only 4 points headlight, which gives it great swing through if you can swing it. So, and also almost no vibration dampening in this, because Rafa, first and foremost, just wants to feel the ball, right? You know, we made a more usable version of this. Now, I don't have that spec with me, but it wasn't the origin, just regular Rafa. And that was like a pure arrow team weight, which is somewhere not the heaviest weight, not the lightest, in between at 10.1. But same thing, more weight in the head. So it swings almost like it's 10.6. So we can talk about weight, but also where is the weight? And so when you go out and play with your friends, you're figuring out, okay, how am I hitting the ball when I'm in position? And how am I hitting it when I'm in trouble? Does it still give me the control I need and the maneuverability I need? Because you're figuring that out. And that's why rackets have gone lighter. You know, years ago, Boblet was trying to get a top American, I won't mention his name, to come on with Boblet. And we had to take a racket down. And this young man's like 6'3", but he liked a really light racket. Back in the day, because the beam widths weren't that thick, you couldn't make different thicknesses in beam width. You were just adding weight to get power. Now guys are going lighter because of how fast it is. So don't be stuck on, you know, what weight people are using. You're trying to figure out what weight you like.
Oh, I think we're back.
I lost you.
Hey, hopefully everyone can hear me. I think we just had a little bit of a connection issue, but yeah, so I have been playing with my PR98 for a while now, but you know, I have a friend who plays with a blade, and he wants to switch to an Air 98 because he's finding that he's being a bit overpowered these days, you know, with his opponent. So, oh, hey, Allan, can you hear me now?
I can. It's a little garbled, but I can understand what you're saying.
Oh, perfect. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. So I was just mentioning how I have a friend who's playing with a blade now, and he played at 50 Nationals, good buddy of mine, and he felt like he was being overpowered, and he actually is interested in switching to the 98, the PR 98, and he also was inspired by where I guess Tsitsipas he hit with Carlos and tried his PR 98, and now I don't know if Tsitsipas has switched or is in the process of. I don't know if you know that, but so yeah, just showing you more so that people want to switch to lighter, more maneuverable and powerful rackets to give them.
We've seen that. Like, I mean, pretty much the pattern is similar with that versus the blade. The beam construction gives you more power, and really what's unique about the Boblat product is the woofer system. So it's a grommet system that's more like an elbow, right? So when the string hits, it elongates this kind of rounded grommet. And that's what makes it a little harder to put the grommets on here, because it's drilled, these holes are drilled straight versus here. So if you look at, people who test a racket, not us, right? Like an independent tester, Tennis Warehouse, they have their own in-sort labs. You look at the power level outside the sweet spot, it's bigger on the Boblat. Now, the frame construction on the Pure Aero 98 is more elliptical, more rounded, not as a hybrid frame like this, which is similar to the blade. This would be like a blade, where it's partly flat, partly rounded, right? When you get into the 98, you get into more of this elliptical construction. This is actually thicker than it looks because it's coming to a tip like an airplane wing. So it cuts the air faster. This beam construction, is thicker, creates a stiffer response. So it cuts the air faster, more powerful. So we've had a lot of Div 1 players switch into the 98 for that same reason, because the power, it's power, how these guys can hit. And it's really the blend. These guys hit big and then can hit an awesome drop shot. I mean, of all the shots you think about Carlos bringing, besides his huge forehand, he brought the drop shot back. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, how good he hits it. But you see more guys doing it because they push each other back with their big shots. So, and, a lot of YouTube reviewers seem to think Tsitsipas is in that racket, and, he's trying the RPM blast. I mean, he's given us a lot of exposure. And what's unique about Boblat is they do the layup for the pros. I mean, they really want to be connected to the pros and what they're doing and what the trends are. Just like Porsche still races, so does Ferrari. They want to know, because what you learn there trickles down. I'm not telling you Pure Aero 98 is for everyone. Pure Aero 98 is great for a high-level player, but Pure Aero's more universal. We sell more Pure Aeros than Pure Aero 98s, but Pure Aero 98s put us on the map. Before, we didn't really sell as many 98s, but now we do. Right? That's a unique deal. And we sell the Pure Drive 98. We talked about it earlier. Dominic Thiem did great with the Pure Strike. Yeah, and it was great having him and all he brought back for us.
Yeah, that guy. I wish he was playing more, or playing. But it was good to see him. I think at a trophy ceremony recently. I forget if he was driving a Porsche or a different car, but let's see, more questions. With our presentation, I always have like this sort of, interview lined up like in mind, and we just get questions and questions. So it's fun. But yeah, RD, thanks guys. Great presentation. Always learning. Appreciate the comment. So I don't think we did this one right now. What's the difference between the Boblat Addiction and the Addiction Plus?
So Addiction's gone. Addiction Plus was really a reaction to making, multi-filaments a little more controllable. So they actually made this softer, but a little crisper, right? So I like the way it plays better in the more powerful rackets. So more comfort, but a little bit crisper feel, a little more durability. So it's basically an upgrade, kind of adjusting to the speed of the market. Because Addiction was soft, but it needed a little bit more control. So this is still soft with more control. So regular Addiction, I mean, there might be some left, but we don't sell anymore. It's more, we went to Plus. Like we do, the Exalt is a unique string because it's a more controllable multi that plays a little bit for lack of a crisper, but you could say with less power, right? Whereas the normal, multi-filament that we sell a lot of is Excel, and that's our softest multi, right? Addiction's in that, but this is even softer. What's unique about this is that it's twisted, so it holds tension better. Because part of the concern with any string is not only how you like it day one, but how is it on day 7, day 14, 21, 30, depending how long you keep your strings.
Yeah, definitely. People look for that value in that form. Let's see. We have because of slower balls, should we consider more powerful rackets or choose more powerful rackets?
So balls are an interesting question. So here's our ball. So the weird thing about here, go ahead, go full screen.
Yeah.
The weird thing about this ball, not weird. What's different is you got to understand this is our gold championship ball. They call it all court. What that means is it's not an extra duty cover like we know in the US. Because in the US, we think all the courts, at least where I'm from, Southern California, are hard court. There are some clay here, but not a lot. So all court balls have a lighter, that's a lighter cover. It's not as woven. So it's a lighter ball. And so that's what they use in Europe because they're playing on clay. The clay gets on the ball and makes it heavier. So extra duty balls have a thicker cover. They last longer. They're better for hard courts. So on the women's tour, they use a regular duty ball because they want it faster, typically. On the men's tour, it depends. Like they asked Rafa Nadal, like, if you were tennis director, what would the one thing you do? He'd say he'd make the ball universal. So everyone makes different balls. Like, there's regulations around what the ball should be in terms of, thickness of cover and weight. But depending how much nitrogen I use in it, it can be heavier or not as heavier. So Dunlop uses more nitrogen, which makes their compression last longer, but it plays a little bit heavier, where other balls might not feel as heavy. Head change where they make their ball, so their ball feels different than it did before. Yonex makes one that's more waterproof, so it feels different. There's about 4 companies that make the balls, like they make them out of these different places. So it just depends what you like. So, a regular duty ball makes a difference. Now, if you're out altitude, they make something called high altitude balls, basically with less compression because the air is thinner, it's faster there. So that's a different ball too. So pay the money. I mean, part of the problem is there are Costco balls. That's a little trickier ball to use for multiple uses. It's good 1 or 2 times, but if they start going dead, that's a sign. What you're trying to feel with those balls is feel the compression of the ball and see if they're similar. You just don't want the ball to go dead because that's going to affect your play too. So quality of ball, whether it's regular duty or extra duty makes a difference. They're all high altitude depending where you play.
Hey everyone, let me know if I'm back.
I can hear you. Yeah, I lost you.
Sorry about that internet connection issue. Just put a yes in the chat. But let's see where we're at. So I know Renee has a really good question about recommendations for budget-friendly strings for tennis elbow sufferers. So I think my thoughts of that in general is you do want to reduce the tension first off and see if that can help. But other than that,
Can you hear me?
Hey, sorry everybody.
That's better.
Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, so uh I think I'm trying to remember. I think we had answered pretty much answered the balls question, right, Alan? Do you have anything else to
Yeah.
add for that?
No, we
Okay.
answer that.
Okay, perfect. So my buddy Renee has a question. Uh, can you ask Alan what his recommendations are for budget-friendly strings for tennis elbow sufferers?
Really depends on what he's using. You can go softer poly. Like we even if he's using poly and he really needs to control, Bobla does something called RPM soft, which moves quite a bit. It's a softer poly. But I mean, basically, this is kind of a monofilament synthetic cut. You know, this plays. That's not the right one, but you get synthetic cut plays decent for the money. It's a good value, right? As you go to addiction, you get a little softer feel. When you go all the way up to excel, you get better. But you know, if you get a softer multi, that's good, or a very soft poly. You go soft poly, you just got to string it looser, right? It's just that one in terms of playability will bottom out faster than a multi. Multi will last you longer. It's better if your arm's hurting to go softer string, lower tensions until your arm
Yeah.
feels better and go from there. Part of what you're trying to consider is why is your arm hurting, right? So, what you're looking at when you're playing is not even just the swing, but how tight are you gripping? The problem is we miss it a little bit. So then we grip tighter and tighter. Well, now your arm's gripping like this for 2 hours straight. You got to learn to relax your grip and only squeeze that impact. I was watching like video of Lindsay Davenport hit her backhand. Her hands literally are off the racket before she swings. And that's just indicative that she's not gripping that hard until she grips. Like I want to squeeze a little at impact to control direction, but it doesn't really help power. Most of these pros are getting the power from the ground reaction, how they move into the ball with their whole body. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, if you watch the footwork drills they do with bands or medicine balls, it's all about getting the kinetic chain to move forward and hit as you're hitting, not so much you swinging hard with your arm. So you got to be careful, A, how you grip, B, if your arm's hurting, get a string material and tension that's comfortable for your arm until it gets better. And then you can start going up.
Yeah, definitely quite a few different factors to consider there as to why that's happening. Let's see. We have what oh yeah, so this is a classic one. I think I remember this question last year, the year before, but when should a racket be replaced?
It's a great question. I mean, I think it depends on how much you use it. At the pro level, they do it more around how much they string. If you string a lot, the hardest thing you do to your racket is string it. So you get a racket, you put it on, and you string 3 mains here, you string here, 3 here, 3 here, back and forth, because it's an unequal pressure on the frame. And the frames are still the good stringer. You have mounts here and here on the sides. Those are all helpful to help this racket not expand too much. But it's still hard on the racket. The hardest thing to do is restring it. So pay attention how much you restring it. I mean, obviously, if you hit the ground a lot because you're chipping a lot, when you restring, pay attention how much you're restringing. Again, if you're going to the same person, this is why it's helpful. And you're also looking at bumper guard wear, right? So if you wear out your bumper guard and don't replace it, and you start getting in the frame, it's going to go weak and crack. So you're looking at wear here, if there's wear on top of your strings, have them replace the bumper guard. So pay attention to that when you're going to restring. Some people will put, head tape here to protect that. But look at your grommets, you can see wear here, and that's all just people going to slice a ball or hit tops and they're hitting the ground. So, pay attention how much you restring. Pay attention to your bumper guard when you do restring, and look at that. So, a lot of it's how much you use it.
Yeah, I don't know if you can tell, but my racket, this area, so like below the bumper guard, definitely tends to get worn. And I mean, do you think I should use head tape and just extend it down there? Because like it to some extent, like it changes the feel, of course, because there's added weight. But I'm wondering what you think.
Changes both, right? Because it changes vibration dampening and it changes the
Yeah,
feel.
that's true.
And the feel is what comes in your hand. You know it, but you don't know it. So,
Yeah.
but bottom line is, it might be time to get you in a newer racket, but how often are you playing?
Well, for a while it was 3 to 4 times a week. The last 3 weeks, maybe like twice, just because I've been busy for the
Yeah,
summit. But yeah,
well,
generally
because what
three or
you do,
four.
but normally 3 to 4 times. Yeah. You're,
Yeah.
you're getting close, right? We got to look at changing that up. It's just, and here's the advantage drawback. You put tape on, you add weight, you change the feel, literally limit some of the feel you get. And this is
Yeah.
why some people do it and some don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So good stuff there. Thanks, Alan. Let's see what else we have. So just some comments. Renee, Dan has been out for 3 to 4 weeks with tendonitis, and then Renee just said rest up. So Arash has and by the way, Alan, just in case, I know we're over 4 o'clock, so let me know if you do have to
No, I'm
run or
good.
anything. Okay, appreciate it. So Arash said, Maribon, thanks for dropping knowledge today. Pretty much Alan dropped the knowledge, but thank you. And then both the 17 and 18 gauge have lasted for months on my rackets before, but I can't always swing out. But to Alan's point, I actually prefer the playability and control that the 18 gauge allows.
Perfect. And this is what we want, right? Because you're understanding advantage drawback. I like the 18 better. I tried the 17. And there we go. Be willing to experiment and know what you like. I mean, we're just talking about advantage drawback when it's a very interesting thing when the bobble developers work with the pros and what they like because they know what they like, but they might not necessarily be able to verbalize that. So they got to walk them through these processes, try this, try that, everything. Like even Runa's racket, I saw it. He's a 4.5. They shave it down because he wants the butt cap to feel a certain way. So it's a little like through this butt cap area, it runs a little differently because he likes that feel.
Mm.
It's not wrong or right, it's just the feel he likes. So he's got a
Mm-hmm.
little different shape on his handle because it customizes the feel he likes. Same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Some people use an overgrip and they really like it. Try to replace a lot. Other people, when they replace, they're only going to put brand new grip on because they want the cushioning and they want to feel the bevels better for the racket. Like
Mm-hmm.
even for us on the Pure Strike, this grip is a Syntec Team, not a Syntec Pro, because it has less cushioning but more feel. That's your trade-off. Well, I feel the bevels for grip changes better, but I get less cushioning. That's your trade-off.
Got it, Alan. Yeah, interesting. I mean, this is kind of just a commentary, a personal one, but my coach was looking at my technique, and he actually suggested that I try, a smaller grip size. But I was just wondering, instead of like using the over grip, maybe I should just try the replacement grip and just see if maybe that'll do it. So
Well,
interesting.
he wants a smaller grip size.
Yeah, that's what he meant. Yeah, recommended.
You could go to Syntec Team grip and would make halfway in between.
Syntec Team. Okay.
Yeah, Syntec Team is the grip, and it's halfway in between. Some people will take the cushion grip off, the replacement grip off, and put an over grip, but that's not as cushioned, right?
Yeah.
So, and you got to be careful with your hand on that. Smaller grips have gotten popular because there's more turnover now. I was surprised during this celebration where we went to France. A lot of the pros use bigger grip sizes. Where back in the day, Nadal and Federer, who are tall guys, were in quarters, right? Some of these guys, 3/8, 4.5. I was surprised. So, but it's a little tricky with pro players because it's like watching basketball players. Like they don't look that tall until you go to the event and you realize they're all tall, right? So some of these guys are bigger than they look on TV. Like even Sharapova, I was at BMP, they're doing a signing, and she's pretty strong and muscular in her shoulders, but she's so well proportioned you wouldn't realize it because she's so tall.
Mm.
Pete Sampras, same way. I mean, he could serve as hard as he did because his shoulders pretty big, but he was tall enough. It didn't really look like he was that tall. Tommy Haas, number 2 in the world, runs BMP. Is a much bigger guy in person than you would realize.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I agree with seeing people, players in person. They look bigger than they are on TV. Alan, I know this is also, of course, the theme is like it kind of depends how long these products will last you. But for if somebody switches to the Syntec Team replacement grip, I mean, about how long does that last? Does that last you longer? I imagine than the standard like over grip change, right? It lasts you for a little bit longer.
What you're looking for is breaks in the fabric, right? So
Okay.
it's a fabric with rubber in it, and you'll start to see breaks, like basically tan parts or gray parts, and you'll feel a slippage, right? So, this one, the one I have here doesn't have much wear, but you're trying to look for breakage in the surface, and that will tell you, and you can feel it too, right? Because as you're making changes and the friction when you're holding, that's the story there.
Got you. Got you. Good to know. Let's see what else we have here. So Jack also really likes the presentation, so it's very helpful. He was
What,
wondering
what
what
we
type. Mhm.
what
Sorry, go
we
ahead.
have, I don't not really know Tufo. I'm not sure what string he's in, but the topic we haven't really talked about is footwear.
Yes, I was gonna pivot to that. Yeah. So I guess any other thoughts, closing thoughts on rackets or strings before we move to footwear.
I mean, you're trying to blend head size, string pattern, weight, and length together, right? You're trying to figure those all out. Length's not really a factor until you get into whether you want to extend in length regular racket, which used to be very popular back in the Roddick days. A lot of your bigger servers were extended length or oversized rackets. A good oversized racket typically is extended length because you're going to it for power, right? And that's why you want it extended length too. Find the right weight for you. Don't feel like you need a heavier weight. Just find that we make really 4 weights. We're going to have 4 weights in our models coming up. So you find the right weight for you. And again, you'll be shocked. Some of these big guys are using lightweight rackets. Now, some use heavier weight rackets, but you're just finding the right weight for you. Weight used to be a thing back in the day where the construction of racket couldn't provide as much power. So be aware of that. With string, it's the material, it's the gauge, and it's the tension, right? And you can also hybrid, and they're adapting multi-filaments to give you some of the benefits of a polyester without being too hard on your arm, right? And yes, it's a softer polyester as you go down, but it's still a non-elastic material that's stiffer on your arm. So keep that in mind, right? And you're finding the right blend for you. And be willing to adapt your string, tension, and potentially choice to your conditions as they change as we get into summer, right?
Yeah.
Pay attention, like we talked about grips, grip shape, replacing your over grip or replacement grip when you feel like it's gone bad. Be aware of that. Just look at it. If it's gone dirty, you see breaks in the cover, it's time to change. And you'll definitely notice a difference in your ability to feel the grip and make the grip change and be secure when you're making contact.
Good stuff. Thanks for that great recap there. So, Alan, yeah, let us go to shoes. Everyone, people love shoes, and it's so important. I mean, especially, I was going to the PT for several weeks there with a little foot issue. So it's so important to get the right footwear for yourself. So, I guess first off, since we're talking about trends, is kind of the theme of one of the themes of the presentation. Like, what do you see in terms of trends with footwear?
Comfort,
Mm,
comfort, lightweight.
there you go.
Comfort and lightweight. I mean, those are two things. I mean, even from the same manufacturer, not all the shoes are the same. Even the same shoe you buy, same size, could change a little bit because 1,000 hands touch that shoe. Like literally, that
Mm,
upper is sewn. It's not like some machine spitting this out. So
wow.
when you're trying on shoes, you're trying to figure out length, right? Length want about a finger width room in front for you to stop. If you're right-handed, your left foot typically is a little bigger. Leave some room for that. You're trying to figure out width. Some people run wider. So find the right width. If you feel like you're rubbing, get a wider shoe. We make 3 different widths in our shoes. And then you're figuring out upper volume. So if there's hot spots, even some of the manufacturers change how they do some of the lacing. It's a little weird. Careful how you lace the shoes, right? And how the lacing feels. So when you're trying it on, you're figuring out length, width, upper volume. And if they call them hot spots for any place you're rubbing. So, you know, for Babolat, this is our 6-month guarantee shoe. Pro Pulse Fury. High support on the outside. All the shoes like we're doing are like dual density. This is a little bit, you know, stiffer here. It's cushioned, but stiffer because it's heavy impact, and lighter cushioning on the forefoot. Michelin helps us with their design. You want something that's split like this just because it allows the shoe to be thicker, but it will still bend for your foot. So you get some of the benefits of durability without it being too stiff, right? It moves like your foot. You know, the trend now is to have now this here because it aids the foot strike. It's going to roll better with your foot, right? You can see it's thicker here and a little thinner where you don't wear as much. So that's some of the adaptations that Michelin's helped us. But you're trying, you know, this is your support 6-month guarantee story. This used to be the story. You'd either buy a cheaper shoe or a 6-month guarantee shoe. And then a shoe like this came out. So these are wider fitting shoes. So D width is normal width. This is beyond D width. See, it's a little bit more square toe box. It's the women's version, men's version. Look at the heel on this. So
Wow.
I'm having a longer heel strike for comfort, even thicker. I'm even higher up off the ground. So I'm getting more cushioning. There's more of a foot frame you sit into because you've added more cushioning. Like I run in Hoka shoes, they added more stack height, higher height off the ground. They added more cushioning. So they had to add a foot frame into the shoe just for stability. So if you add cushioning, you have to make it more stable. And that's what Babolat had to do with this SFX short shoe. We sell this shoe really good. It's like 109 retail. This is your comfort with story. So the last story is more in the jet shoe, right? So this is a lightweight story. So we make a special upper called Matrix upper, which is still very supportive, but it's this lightweight, you know, still with good rubber on the bottom, but this is a lightweight story so you can move more quickly. So it's a lighter shoe. So you can go durability support, you can go with comfort, you can go lightweight. We even do it, you know, this is you'll see more in the pickleball story, but they like the shoe a lot because there's a lot of change of direction. Allan, what's the difference between a pickleball shoe and a tennis shoe? They have really similar demands, right? A little more change of direction in pickle because there's more change of direction. There's less go forward, right? Smaller court. But so it's lightweight. It can be durability support. It can be with comfort. You're trying to find the right shoe that fits your foot, right? And be aware of it. Don't assume all fits the same, right? And really walk around the shoe, stop in the shoe, see how it feels for you, right? And if it's hurting you or you have hot spots, you know, don't continue to wear that shoe. All the manufacturers, the goal is now get the fit right within the first 5 to 10 seconds. It's got to be out once comfortable. There's no break in time. Get the right fit and make sure length, width, and how does that lace system feel on the top of your foot? If it doesn't feel right, it's probably not going to get any better as you go on. It's not. Back in the day, the shoes were more leather uppers. So that upper would stretch and conform to your foot. Now, that didn't make it as supportive as these shoes, right? The shoe systems you see here are more staggered. That pulls and gives you a better fit with less hot spots, right? And you'll see that across the board with these more staggered systems. I'm not sure if you can see it as well here. Same thing here, right? It's not uniform. They're coming at, it's going to pull on your foot a little differently and give you more support. So that's what you're looking for. I mean, everyone has the different things they're looking for in shoes, but comfort, you know, and lightweight are even more important to most people. Some people, it's going to be more, hey, I'm just hard on shoes. You know, Nadal used a very durable, supportive shoe, whereas Federer was more on the lightweight story. But things have definitely gotten a lot more lightweight. which has changed the shoe story because you're going to wear those shoes out maybe a little bit faster because they're lighter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, with that, oh, sorry.
So look at that. When you're looking at your shoe, if you had your shoe 6 months and you're not worn through the sole a lot, but you feel like the upper's breaking down, it's breaking down. Pay attention to how that shoe feels to you. Now, some of you are just toe dragged. There's certain areas you just wear on. Like, you can see we build up the side of the shoe here because Roddick used to like run the side of his shoe here. And like some of the young guys, like they're literally wearing out the top of their shoe. Asics just came out with the shoe that's super high on the inside because you got guys now who are sliding on hard courts. They had to make it more durable here because of the way the guys are sliding on the hard court, which, Monfils kind of started that, but you see it now. I mean, that was common on clay, but now it's common on hard court. So some shoe constructions changed a little bit to adapt to that. That's not that's more the younger user or the adapted user to doing it, but pay attention to what you're looking for the shoe to do for you. But that's why we've made, more durability on this part. Where are your wear areas when you look at your shoe? And how does that compare? You'll know because you'll see the wear.
Yeah, I think that's really smart because I was going to ask a question about, sometimes I feel like we'll have to sacrifice if we go toward the light and comfort, it won't be as durable. But it seems like the SFX has it covered very well with, durability in the hot spots. So that's really good. And the SFX that really, intrigued me because I didn't realize how much of like a, pronounced heel with the cushioning that is
new, right? This is a radical change for us.
Yeah.
It's a radical difference. I mean, if you look at running shoes, you've seen this higher stack height, extended heel, because it's taking more pressure off the heel. There's more, your heel is striking the ground for a little more time, but it's not one hard strike to one spot, right? It's dissipated over the line, and there's a lot of cushioning in this heel. Typically a little stiffer cushioning because it's more resistance, a little softer on toe off. And again, you see the split sole. Not a new idea. Nike kind of started this. This allows you to create a thick sole, but it will still bend well, right? It won't be a forced bend. You have usually a stiffer bridge in the center to give you support. And you're thinking about, for those who need it, consider some type of soft orthotic if you're having, plantar fasciitis or something like that. That support will give you the support you need in your shoe too if you need additional support.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly, that's what I have. I have PF and plantar fasciitis, and I think that the profile of this shoe, and neither of us, of course, are orthopedists or whatever, but it seems like the wide profile and the heel protection in that shoe would probably be very good.
It's good, but
yeah.
Your arch support determines it. I mean,
yeah,
I was having problems in my feet, and as a tennis pro way back in the day before I started working for Bob a lot, and I had to get the length better in my shoe because I was like wearing a size 10, but they're like, you're not a 10, you're an 11 and a half. You just,
oh gosh,
over time your feet grow, and there you go, right? My feet grow and I lost hair, but let's not get into that. Okay, it's painful. And as I aged, right, I was starting to get plantar fasciitis, and they're like, you need to get support for your foot. I mean, you can go to an orthopedist and they can do something that modifies it, or you can get, like a soft orthotic. Here we've got Road Runner Sports or Fleet Feet or anything that will mold an insert to your foot that will just support it where it's at. And either one of those are good to do, just so your arch works right. Your foot works as a lever if it goes well, but if it doesn't go well, all those 100 bones in there are just crunching at each other and putting stress on that plantar fasciitis tendon in your foot. So as you age, you might need to get a little more support, right? Supportive shoes, Hoka has become popular because they were the first one to create the rocker system and bring a lot of cushioning into shoes. But it's just like Asics did for the tennis market, a running manufacturer bringing in heavily cushioned, comfortable shoes at once comfort and lightweight story. They were the one to bring it in. Nike brought in the split sole, and everyone had to adapt. Nike was the first, right? And you're just figuring out what works for you. It's a little
Yeah.
tricky. It's some shoes they're just around look. Other shoes are around
Mm.
function. So make sure you're getting a shoe that's around the function you're looking for, that's adapted to you and what your priorities are. If you run wider, you just run wider. Pay attention to that and don't ignore it, right? Because even within our brand, shoes fit differently because they're created for a different type of foot.
Yeah.
I
No,
mean, you got to understand, Roddick was an amazing supporter for us. He does a highly informative podcast. I find him quite
yeah.
entertaining. He was a great supporter for us, in, top 10, top 5 for 10 years. Great. Kind of led the
Shoot
charge for
serve.
America for many years. Amazing.
Yeah.
But he was like, when he came over from Roddick, from Reebok, and we had to buy the last for him because his feet are so
Mm.
wide. He calls himself flat-footed, but he runs wide. Like I've seen Federer's foot, special last. He's a very wide forefoot. And so Nike had to create
Mm.
a special shoe for him. But again, he doesn't look that way because these guys are just tremendous athletes, right? Obviously they're gifted, but they're gifted also not just with the hard work they put in, but just with their bodies. They're amazing athletes. So, but they had to get adapted footwear for them. So you're the same.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's great stuff there. And then Rebecca, are there any shoes specifically for clay?
Yes, clay's a different sole. So a great question. And there's adapted shoes for grass. We'll talk about that in a minute. So clay sole, I don't really have it. I don't have exactly the one I want to show you, but I don't sell as much clay. But what it is it's a herringbone pattern, which is kind of crisscross, but it comes to a blade. So you want a clay sole when you're playing clay because it comes to a blade like this versus hit these, which are deeper grooves. So that blade will help you grip the surface better, but it also helps the clay to fall out. Like you'll see the pros like knock their shoes. They're knocking the clay out so they can keep the grip. But the clay sole is a herringbone and it's a blade, which works great from clay. If you did that on hardcourt, you'd wear that blade out super quick. But clay is not the same wear, right? So definitely a clay sole. Typically for grass, it's more of a rounded knob. They used to wear literally spikes, but it's so hard on the
Mhm.
grass. They prefer them not to. It's like more of a rubber knob. So that knob is like basically like a cleat that they wear for grass. So there's an actual grass shoes, and we make those. Obviously, we don't sell them as much in the US. They sell more in the UK where they have more grass.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
So
Thanks.
again, adapted technology to the surface.
Gotcha. Oh, and sorry, Rebecca just followed up. I should have asked what Babolat shoes are available that you sell.
Well, I sell across that range, right? And we do like, we have different price points. Like this is like the Jet Mach 3, but it's the Jet Terry, which is still in that lightweight story, not quite as supportive, right? Because it doesn't have the matrix upper, a little different quality lower, but now it's at 199 retail versus 149, right? Same thing here. We make the SFX at 109, we make an SFX Ego at 89. So you find the right price point too, right? Fury's just at 139. We just only make one Fury in that. So part of it's around price point. Same thing you'll find with rackets, right? We make what we call a boost racket, which is for someone who wants to spend $109 and just get started. A very good racket for the money, but it doesn't have as much of the woofer system. It's not as highly quality a build, but still plays great. And then you can go up into rackets like this. That's Evo. You're at 169, a lot of comfort, little bigger head size, even more vibration, damping, and more open pattern because it's more that intermediate feel. Which this racket, to me, I actually like playing with it because it's so comfortable. And then you get into the pure rackets, which give you more feedback, but you're now at a higher price point because you're getting into the 200s.
Gotcha. So Allan, is it mainly the Babolat Terre that's clay specific, or there's the other
We
ones
do it in the
too?
Terry. We do it in the Jack Mach 3.
Okay, Terre and Jetmach. Yeah.
Depending where you live, right? Not in California, in my part, Southern Cal, you won't really find any clay shoes. But in other areas, you'll find more of it. Definitely. When you go
Gotcha.
back east more, because they play more on clay.
Gotcha. Jet Terry looks pretty nice in that like
It's nice.
black
Yeah.
color. Yeah, that's cool. Um, very good, very good. Let's see. We'll take one or two more. So Liz, for doubles players, is it typically better to go with a bigger head size, 102 or 105? I know we chatted about it a little bit, but any other thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on your swing speed. The 105 is definitely going to give you more power and more margin. You got to pay attention to length. Hopefully it's got extended length. If you go to 105, it's not extended, won't really give you the response you want. 102 would give you more maneuverability. And with that, you're looking at beam width, right? What's the head size and what's the beam width? You can see there's a thicker beam. Pay attention to your pattern with that too. More open pattern will give you more spin, more response, more margin, a little less control. And play around with both and see how you like them.
Yeah, definitely gotta test and see what works. Good stuff, Alan. I guess okay. So any sort of conclusion in terms of like advice for players on the shoe front before we do the outro?
Just know yourself. Know how your foot runs, how it fits. Don't change in your mind that you think every shoe is going to be the same or fit the same or even length. Boblet worked for years to get the length and width right for our market, for the U.S. market, because we sell a lot of shoes for Boblet, and Europeans, fit and wear differently. I mean, the U.S. foot just runs bigger. Asian foot sometimes will run bigger too. Wider in the forefoot is what I mean. So that's different. I mean, even the way the Europeans wear apparel, like I had to kind of get used to wearing their jackets because their sleeves like fit much closer to the body. They just, kind of that, slim fit that we know in our market. That's standard Euro fit. They just wear it that way.
Yeah.
So it's, find the upper volume you like, the length and the width, and adapt it and understand the shoe you're looking at. And most of the manufacturers follow the trends. What you're buying a certain one. Do I, what am I looking for? Do I really need, am I a hard mover where I need the support like Nadal did? Or am I a lighter mover where I really want a lighter, more maneuverable shoe like Federer did? It's not a wrong or a right. It's just what you like and adapt it.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%, Alan. We really appreciate all the knowledge you gave us today. I really love talking gear. We could talk for another hour. Honestly, I could have asked you about the strings and everything.
I think what we've got to kind of get ready for is tariffs are going to change things in terms of pricing, right?
I was thinking of asking you that.
Not a popular thing to break up. Babolat's not really made price changes yet, and they will absorb some of the cost just because that's what Eric Babolat wants to do. But just prepare yourself. You'll see some increases for that just because, there's some great manufacturers. I mean, most of your rackets are made in China. Yeah, Yonex makes in Japan, Japanese company. They have a factory there, but tariffs will affect them also. And, they make quality product. But a lot of your best builders are there, so that's interesting. Footwear's China and elsewhere. Bags will get affected. Malaysia makes some of those. That's a textile. So that's all affected by that, So, France, we make a lot of our strings in France. In Carball, we make a lot of our multi-filaments. Plurmel is where the cows are, so we make it actually in that area because that's where we get the raw material from. But, you're going to see a lot of this affect those materials. So we'll see. I mean, again, it's a moving target at this point, but I'm just putting in your mind, we're trying to prepare for it. It's like, who knows, when COVID first started happening and affected product and how we got it, my wife and I are like, well, I can't imagine spending 3 or 4 weeks at home. And then it's 2 years, but whatever, things change. So it's a new day. And, I'm no economic expert, so I can't comment on whether it's wrong or right. That's not my purpose on that. It's just prepare yourself. I mean, all manufacturers have to adjust to this and just keep it in mind.
In other words, stock up on Babolat stuff.
Be aware of it.
I mean,
just
you might want
it's going to change. you're trying to find the right balance of comfort and performance.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to poly for the durability idea, I get it. But if you're hurting your arm, it's not a long-term play. Try to adapt it to where you're getting the most value and long-term comfort out of what you're using.
Yeah, definitely, Alan. Alan, where should people follow, what you're doing or bubble out? I know you also have an Instagram account. So any
Instagram,
ones?
I'm going to do more on that. We're getting someone who's going to help us more on Instagram. So I'll start
Nice.
posting on that. You'll see more on that. So you can see more about how we want to activate. I mean, part of Bob Lott's goal is to be, connected to the pro player, but be connected to the shops and really be connected locally to the player by doing, demo events and activation. So we can reach out and touch the local player and get them connected to your local shop who can give you great service. Obviously, you get great information from the internet. Dealers like Tennis World puts a lot of time and effort into reviewing and getting other reviewers to help them. They're very informative, and I love the work they do, and what you do online, providing these different professionals to come on and learn from different people. I mean, there's not a wrong or a right. There's some parity in terms of technique, but even if you look at technique, there's 5 different modern forehands that people hit. Just got to find what fits for you. And there's advantage to drawbacks to both, right? And so, get your information, connect to your local dealer that you feel you're getting the right service and attention from. Because at the end of the day, it's personal. You're trying to get the right adaptive product for you and what you do and what you like. And it's a whole blend. Racket, string, grip choice, like even overgrip. Some are more absorbent, some are more tacky. What do you like? I don't know. Does your hand sweat a lot? If you sweat a lot, you need a more absorbent grip. If you don't sweat that up much, you want more tacky grip. But, that's all adaptive. Even whether you put a dampener in your racket or not. Like, what does this do for your racket? Well, it just changes the way it sounds. It won't make it easier on your arm, but these rackets are hollow like an airplane wing. So they make a noise. If you put this in, they make less noise. Do you like that? Well, you might, yes, or you might not. So it just depends.
Yeah.
So it's all adaptive to what you like. Chang didn't use a dampener, didn't like it. Sampras used a dampener. Eggsy put a rubber band in to create dampening. Just depend on what you like.
Yeah, classic. Yeah, definitely. And that's what makes tennis so fun, just like figuring out what's the best gear, testing and refining and things like that, even down to the gauge. So yeah, it's a good fun sport.
It's personal.
And,
I mean, that's what's so great about it. If you think you're better than I am, well, let's go play. There's no coach deciding, right? We go play and we can do it whenever and wherever and however we want. You want to hit a one-handed back, you want to hit 2, you want to slice, you want to top spin. You do it your way, which is awesome. I mean, Carlos, I think he's got something out coming on Netflix, Carlos Alcaraz, and it's called My Way because he's Spanish, but he plays differently than Nadal, which, I love Nadal. Nadal's been amazing for our sport. I, honestly miss him, but I mean, having Carlos, he's a totally different guy and he's amazing too. Right. Mm-hmm. And what he's done at 21 is crazy good, but all these guys are doing it their way, which is amazing. And you're going to do it your way and you adapt it to you. And understanding the advantage drawback in your choices, adapt it. And you can adapt, to the season or to where your game's going to. Like, a 12-year-old player, they're going to keep adapting as their game develops. I have a young man that I was working, helping out with in LA. He's developing as a player, top national player. Was in a 100 square inch, just went to a 98 because he needed more racket speed.
Nice.
That's good for him, but that's not necessarily good for everybody. We got a lot of pure drive users, even at the pro level, who want a 100 square inch racket that's gives more response. He wanted more maneuverability and control. Just depends what you're trying to generate and what you're trying to control coming to you.
Yeah, very individual. Allan, I want to thank you again for all the time you put in. I know we're hour 40 now, and really appreciate your time. Time's valuable. And also, everybody, check out the button right below this video. There's a button that has a link to Babolat. So if you just click that link, that button, then you can check out all the great products that we mentioned today, whether it's rackets, strings, shoes, or anything else. So, Allan, thanks so much for coming on. I'm sure we'll be in contact again soon and make some content together. So thank you for educating us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for the time. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. We'll see you at 7 o'clock for the next live stream. Thanks.